Hey guys, welcome to Momtourage Mini episode 2. Today we're chatting with Newbery award-winning author Kate DiCamillo, whose book The Magician's Elephant is going to be a film out on Netflix on March 17th, which is today. So go watch it.
So watch it, people.
Today's guest is an American children's fiction author. She has published over 25 novels, including Because of Winn-Dixie, The Tiger Rising, The Tale of Despero, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, The Magician's Elephant, and the Mercy Watson series. Her books have sold around 37 million copies. 4 have been developed into films, and 2 have been adapted into musical settings. Her works have won various awards. The Tale of Despero and Flora and Ulysses won the Newbery Medal, making DiCamillo one of 6 authors to have won 2 Newbery Medals. Her newest book to film adaptation, The Magician's Elephant, is on Netflix today. Please welcome Kate DiCamillo. Hi, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
Good. You are very accomplished. I'm very excited to be speaking with you.
Well, I listened to you reading all that out and thought, wow, who's that? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's funny what our own heads think of ourselves and when we versus when other people are talking about our accomplishments, right?
Right. No, and I just think of myself as a little chipmunk who's sitting here writing stories. So,
Well, you are so much more. So give us a small synopsis of the story, The Magician's Elephant.
so it begins with a boy who visits a fortune teller and gets to ask one question. And the question that he asks is his sister alive? He's lost his sister. And then what happens? The fortune teller tells him he must follow the elephant to get the answer. And an elephant comes crashing through the roof of an opera house. So that's how it begins. And it's the story of Peter looking for his sister and the story of impossible things becoming possible.
I love that. So I've only seen the film. I have not read the book. My son isn't quite the right age yet to read your books. Is the film any different from the book, in your opinion?
The film is different than the book. Every film is always different than the book. They're different art forms, so they have different demands on them. The differences here only deepen the original story. When Peter has to do those 3 impossible tasks in the movie, that's not in the book, but it plays beautifully to the themes of the book, of the impossible becoming possible.
That's amazing. So you grew up sickly as a child, correct?
Correct.
Okay. How has this affected the stories that you write? Because I imagine writing for children, you're probably drawing from your own experience to some extent.
Oh, that's a really good way to put it, and it's funny because I talk about being sick as a kid often, but I don't get asked questions about it. And when I think about it, it's like I don't know that I would be a writer without that sickly childhood. So it's one of those things where it was a hard thing, but it gave me a real gift, in that I learned the power of story. I spent so much time alone um, that I learned that all the comfort there was to be had in a book, but also that thing of telling stories. And I think that if you go back and read a lot of people who became writers were sickly children. I don't think it is an accident.
That's interesting. What an interesting perspective. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense because you're so, like you said, kind of isolated. You're not out playing with other kids. It's very much your own imagination. I mean, I'm an only child, so I had myself to play with, and that sounds terrible, but all I was so in my head and so imaginative. I am not a writer, but I am a creative to some extent. So I guess that it would make sense that children that are kind of
Yeah,
um
it's one, and it's also like when I talk to kids about that, about being sick as a kid, and also that my father left the family early when I was a kid. Those things are hard things, right? Um,
Yes.
but they give you something, and that's something that you don't see when you're living it, but you can see it when you come out the other side of it. It becomes a gift.
Do you find that this is not in my questions, but do you find that facing that adversity as a child is really influenced all of your different stories in terms of adversity and children facing maybe things that are a little more difficult than usual on a kid?
Absolutely. And also that thing of, I was always frustrated as a kid when everything ended up absolutely perfectly in a story
Yeah.
because it didn't reflect the life that I was living. And so I feel like to write the stories is to tell the truth about how hard things are, and also to tell the truth that things will be okay. Life is really difficult. Life is really beautiful. That's what the stories are for, to comfort us and to illuminate and to tell us that things will be okay, but not to lie to us.
That's
Things
a
are,
beautiful perspective.
yeah.
Um, so this kind of touches on that, but many of your stories have a theme of someone who is alone and has to survive on their own, undergoing suffering and loneliness, and the Disney loved theme of an absent or dead parent. And obviously, The Magician's Elephant is no different. Why do you think so much of children's writing has this theme that dates back to kind of Victorian or Edwardian, excuse me, eras?
Yeah, and it's I remember in a writing group that I was in, um somebody said it's just a logistical thing, and it's an interesting way to look at it, that because if you get the parents out of the way, as it were, you give the kids agency, right? um
Huh.
and that is true, but I can't answer it in the larger sense. I can only answer it for myself, and that, back to my father leaving, it's just like that made a really profound impact on me. When you're a kid and a parent leaves, and you don't know why and you don't understand it, um, then that, so I'm working through that single parent theme in almost every story that I tell. And not that writing is therapy, but it has been very therapeutic for me. So
I always chalked it up, especially in the Disney example, I always chalked it up to it's basically the most severe thing a child would have to face.
oh, sure. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's the most terrifying thing of all, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
if you lose your parents, how are you going to survive in the world? It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you write a book, do you oh, I'm sorry. I skipped a question. Many of your protagonists have this, I'll do it all on my own kind of spunk. How do you find Peter reflecting this in this story?
Um, Peter, wow. And this is like, we can talk about the book and we can talk about the movie, and how I was doing a press junket with Wendy Rogers and Julia Pister, who producer director of this movie. And I said to them, there's that moment in the movie when Peter does the first of the impossible tasks for the king, and he steps out into a literal arena, and you see this shot of this, how small he is, and how enormous the arena is. And that's the way it always feels like to be a kid, right? It's just like, the world is massive. You've been tasked with something that seems impossible, and you're gonna, so that that moment for Peter in the movie is also the moment in the book, although it doesn't get, it's not visually the same. It's still the same feeling. He's got,
Right.
it's this thing of, wow, I cannot do this thing that is so impossible, but yet I will, because I want to find my sister.
So when you write a book, do you see a celebrity playing it in your mind as you write? You have such a this all-star cast voicing these we have, these characters. We have Mandy Patinkin, who doesn't love Mandy Patinkin?
Right.
Miranda Richardson, who's a British goddess, Cian Clifford, from Fleabag, Cree Summer, who's one of those faces and voices of our childhood, just to name a few. So, how is it hearing these characters come to life for you?
Oh, it's utterly divine. I mean, and like when I'm, the whole experience, like when I'm writing, it's all the way back to us at the beginning. The little chipmunk typing away in there, and 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 like trying to tell a story well and true, to have it turn into something as beautiful as this movie, to hear those voices, I would never dare to dream that big. I just think, okay, let me tell this story as well and truthfully as I can. And then these miraculous things come along and happen, because this is a gorgeous, gorgeous movie, not only with the voices, but visually, it's just stunning. And
It
it just
is.
has a real emotional heart to it that just kind of knocks me over. So,
So I read, and we're very into this here at Momtourage. I read that you received 473 rejection letters before getting your first book published. And that is like so unbelievably relatable to Carrie and I on so many levels, as artists, as moms, as women who have their own business. How and what kept you pushing on even after 472? Like how did you keep at it?
well,
Because so many people would bow out, you know?
I have, back in the day, I had a PowerPoint presentation that I would do in schools with kids, and I would talk about, okay, so now, after you've written a story and you send it out into the world, what do you get back? And kids always say, money. And I go, no, 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 no. You get rejection letters, and then I make them guess how many rejection letters. And it's so funny because I have never had a kid. They're there's a group of them. They're encouraging each other, yelling. They go as high as they go 50. They never, and then that number comes up on the screen, 473, and there's just kind of like crickets it for a minute, and then they go wild. And I always say to them, every time this number comes up on the screen behind me, I think the same thing, which is, what if I'd given up at 471? I wouldn't be standing here talking to you. None of this would have happened. And what made me keep on going? I don't know. I think it's, I knew for a long time that I wanted to write. Um, and I didn't start writing until I was 30. It took me a long time to actually sit down and do the work. And by the time I sat down to do it, I understood that it all just depended on me. I couldn't make myself talented. I couldn't make myself lucky, but I could make myself do the work and be persistent about putting the work out in the world. And that was the only thing I could control. So I just wasn't going to give up.
I think that's such an important lesson to teach children. I mean, one of the things I'm trying to instill in my son right now is, if you want something, he really wanted to be student of the month. And I said, if you want that, tell your teacher, hey, what do I have to do to be student of the month? People can't read your mind. They don't know that you want something. And resilience is the next step in that lesson for a child. So that's awesome that that's one of the things that you're teaching them. Um,
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, please.
No, it's just it's fascinating because they don't. There's another point in that PowerPoint where I talk about all the time that I spent wanting to do this thing and not doing it, and I say to them, it's actually easier to do something than it is to want to do something, and
Yep.
that takes a long time to get that into your head. But it's easier actually to do the work than it is to just dream.
I had a career change in my life, and I did it, in my late 20s as well. And I can't I could not agree with you more. It really is harder to not do it than to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
The just you feel better when you at least pursue it. Even if you're rejected, you feel better. You feel like you're at least chasing what you really want.
Yep, absolutely.
So, do you yourself like children? Like Carrie and I are still very much on the fence, even though we are mothers, and I feel like we have to know that knowing that we have a mom show, uh, we still put that out there. We want to be honest with people. So, as a children's book author, you must feel the same. I would assume you feel the same pressure that we feel in being like, "Oh, children are the best." Because kind of your career is geared towards that.
Well, this is like one of the great wonders and gifts of doing this was, like when the very first book came out, which was because of Winn Dixie, and I started to do school visits where I would go in and talk to the kids. I was like, wow, this is lucky. I love kids. And be I don't know, I'm short and loud and irreverent, and they there's this wonderful thing that happens where they trust me, maybe because I'm short, maybe because I'm loud, I don't know, but it is a wonderful, wonderful gift of the whole thing to find out how I think about this one kid that came through a signing line once, and he was leaning on me as I was signing his book, and his mother said, "Don't lean on her." And he said, "It's okay, Mom. She knows me." And I'd never met the kid, and he'd never met me, but we do know each other because of the books, and that has like been the great gift of doing this.
It must be very healing in its own ways as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, it was so beautiful meeting you, discussing the book, the film. When my son's a little bit older, we'll read the book together. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and chat with me.
I super, super enjoyed it. Thank you, Ashley. Thanks.
Thank you. And everybody, make sure you're watching The Magician's Elephant on Netflix today.